So then we get the beginning of all the main event shenanigans. Howard Finkel introduces the presenter of the title belt, Robin Leach again, with the guest ring announcer, Bob Uecker. Some guy gets in the aisle and gives him a big hug before security get rid of him. Uecker then introduces the guest timekeeper, the hostess of the Wheel of Fortune, Vanna White. They then pipe over the Wheel of Fortune music from the UK version, as I said earlier on.
I've got so much stuff on these next two segments, but basically I'll try and pick out some highlights. I know we're short on time. So first of all, the beautiful Winged Eagle title belt, which I could quite happily do to what Brad Maddox did to the old NXT women's title. But I wouldn't need anyone else in the room with me. Just give me that belt. Give me about 15 minutes. No problem. Have a lovely old time.
15 minutes, that's not ambitious enough, mate.
I want to spread it out, make sure that the climax is a good one. Basically, Jesse was all over the place with Vanna here. So he said that he was meeting her at midnight, but in the next breath, he questioned whether she could tell the time. And then he called Uecker a lecherous old man, just as Vanna got a kiss from Donald Trump. And Jesse mentioned Michael Jackson. This is all in the space of like 10 very, very awkward seconds. And then Uecker did the kind of shaky Hulk Hogan sell for Vanna kissing on the cheek. One final comment on Uecker: immense hair. Fantastic hair. Hairline, volume, everything. Yeah, fair play.
You've said it all there with regards to the start of the match with the shenanigans. Big pop for Vanna White.
So, the main event time. I think this is where Stephen's going to say his match of the night. 9.5 minutes long. Randy Savage versus Ted Dibiase for the title. Ted Dibiase has Andre the Giant with him. Halfway through the match, after Andre has tried to interject himself in the match a couple of times, Randy Savage sends Elizabeth backstage and she returns with Hulk Hogan for the big pop of the night, really. The match then ends when, as DiBiase applies a sleeper hold, the ref is distracted by Andre and Hogan gets in the ring, hits DiBiase in the back with a chair. Savage then hits the flying elbow and gets the pin. After the match, Hogan and Savage celebrate together with Elizabeth. Savage puts Liz on his shoulder in an iconic moment as well. Let's start with you, Alex, because I know Stephen's got a load to talk about.
Really, really good. This was another contender for my match of the night, but again, I hated the ending. I'll come on to that bit in a minute. I really liked Andre's presence at ringside, actually. You could tell that he was, and again, Savage's selling by the distraction was fantastic. I love that he got Elizabeth to go and get Hogan, and it wasn't just Hogan come down. It just showed smarts and stuff. Most life I've seen in a crowd all night. Again, we're talking about Savage selling the fact that he's just had such a grueling night, and that's what he's selling. Absolutely fantastic. But the end, I hated the end because he's worked hard all night and he's won the belt by cheating. And it's obviously not him, it's Hogan. But it, for me, ruined that moment of Savage winning. And I knew that Hogan got involved, and I couldn't remember why it was. But it really pissed me off. It completely ruined it for me. Completely ruined it because, like I've said, he's worked hard all night and he's showing that he's knackered. He's worked hard all night. All night he's been beating these people. And then he's won the belt by cheating at the end. Now, I get that, obviously, the story goes on to the next WrestleMania. But that's why I couldn't have it as my match of the night, because I was that pissed off with the end. It couldn't be. So that's why I went for Honky Tonk versus Beefcake instead.
Yeah, there's one thing being pissed off at this match because of the end, and then there's another one giving that the match of the night, in fairness.
I'm standing by it, sticking by it.
In terms of the ending, though, I mean, again, it kind of does tally a little bit. So I've talked about this before, and I've talked about it in regards to Roman Reigns today, because I feel like WWE shouldn't worry about anybody else. They should just worry about Roman Reigns keeping over as a star. There's a thing that crept in the 90s and the 2000s where people kept wanting everybody to be elevated to the top. And actually, I think this period in the late 80s shows why you don't need that. You just need your top guy to be at the top, and everyone else then gets built up enough to face him, and that's all that matters. And that's what's happened here. It still has to be about Hogan because Hogan's the top star. So that's why they did it. And I don't mind it from that perspective, even though I get what you're saying. I guess Gorilla Monsoon kind of does a thing at the end where he kind of says, well, Andre already interfered on DiBiase's behalf, so it's fair. So it's all fair. And that in itself probably was enough to just get us through. But I can see why it disappointed you.
I think he could have come in with the chair and chased Andre off. And that's another thing I've got I've got Hogan, fuck off and let Savage celebrate. But that's obviously not going to happen. But fantasy booking, get the chair, come down, chase Andre off, and let it be one-on-one. Savage v Dibiase, best man wins. That's what should have happened. And if that had happened, it would have been my match of the night by a country mile. But it didn't. It really pissed me off.
In a minute, I'm going to give Stephen the chance to say what he wants to say. What I will say is that, and I'll leave it at this, if that had happened, what you just said, that would have taken away from me what the best thing about this show is. Stephen, off you go.
So here we go. So Randy in white and blue, Liz in all white. And I hadn't realised until I was watching this that this was the colours that Randy had for his WrestleMania 7 match. Perhaps these are favourite colours of his, and perhaps that's the most boring thing I've ever said in a podcast. I didn't quite say it out loud, but my brain definitely went, come on, Randy, for a match I knew it was 34 years ago. And I know the result. Unfortunately, Jesse Ventura brought things down by asking Gorilla who he'd rather. Now, you can fill in the blank there. Liz or Vanna, and Gorilla picked Liz. Jesse said he'd pick Vanna because Liz he'd have to fight Randy for. Gorilla added he tried to do this in a politically correct way as possible in 1988. I thought you just meant as a beautiful person. Yeah, we knew what he meant. No pop for the start of this WWF World Title match, and thanks to the Atlantic City morgue. They were mildly reincarnated for the spots with Andre interfering. They chanted for Hogan. Though, something I touched on earlier on, when Hogan came out, he did not get a big reaction from this crowd coming out to save Randy Savage. So they wanted him, they got him, they didn't react. Bizarre. Though, that all said, by the end, they were into this. And I think just about this was worth the whole 3 hours and 30 minutes. As I said, Savage, I started watching wrestling in late 1990, started getting all the tapes. I think certainly by WrestleMania 7, I'd seen all the Mega Power stuff. So I'd seen that whole story. So WrestleMania 7, that what happens there is still my favourite. I think that's the best thing WWF have ever done. And that's my favourite moment in wrestling when they reunited. So I didn't live this at the time, but I felt like I almost did. So for Savage here, I mean, this elbow drop 3/4 away from across the ring, basically from the heavens. The 1, 2, 3, the crowd erupted. Elizabeth, her reaction, blimey. I mean, I'm sure this was completely legitimate. She was crying her eyes out. I shed a little bit of a tear. This was absolutely incredible at the end. And this was what it was. This was Savage, the person who'd been through everybody. He got the 4 wins. And what Ben, I think you were alluding to, is they achieved what they wanted to achieve. They got the title from Hogan via Andre and DiBiase onto Savage. Savage did a really commendable job at the box office while Hogan was away, and then they set in wheels of motion. And I'm sure it was in, and I know how WWF used to book. They knew where they were going with this, and that's why all the handshakes, and you see the little new. If you watch SummerSlam '88, the main event of that, all the nuances in that are incredible. With Savage looking at Hogan, and this was the start of it. One of their best ever stories, their biggest pay-per-view up to that point, and for a long time afterwards was the 89 WrestleMania. While the show was the pits, this was worth getting there for, I thought, in the end.
Yeah, that's what I'm alluding to, is the fact that you're right. I think they absolutely planned it, and it goes back to what I said earlier on when Stephen, you were in here actually when we were talking about the build up to Hogan Andre, which is ultimately they make you believe that you're going on a journey with Hogan, which started in 1984 when he won the title from Iron Sheik. You see him celebrating with Andre the Giant after that match. That's in the build up to WrestleMania 3 with Hogan and Andre. Then they have Hogan and Andre. They have the controversial finish, or the controversial bit where Andre should have pinned him. Then they have the rematch. They have what happens on Saturday night's main event. They have DiBiase buy the title. They have the title be vacated. Then they set up this tournament to get the belt from Hogan to Savage without them fighting each other, so that they can build Savage to that match with Hogan. It goes back to the fact that at the beginning of the show, they don't have anything to main event this show because they've got nobody left. Hogan can't face anyone bigger or more dominant than Andre the Giant. There's nowhere for them to go. So what they do, rather than just come up with a phony heel monster that could, maybe they pushed in like 2 months, or even a phony storyline where they make him friends with someone and break them up in 2 months, which is probably what they would do now, because I've seen it happen at WrestleMania nearly every year in the last 5-10 years. They instead come up with this whole tournament thing so that by the end of it, you can end with Hogan and Savage and document this really special moment between them as friends, so that you can then come back to it the following year and change the thing that you're selling Hogan on. It's no longer about him overcoming a bigger and bigger threat in Bundy and Andre, or probably Big John Studd might have been another option they'd have thrown out at some point, and One Man Gang, and eventually Boss Man and whatever else. It's now a very personal battle with someone that legitimately was his best friend, and you've been able to sell that because they've been together for over a year by the time they actually do break up. And not only have they been together for a whole year, but they've been together and then gone through feuds together against other teams. Andre Andre and DiBiase, and then the Twin Towers later on in the year. So I actually think, Stephen, it's not one of the best. It's the best storyline they've ever made.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, they've done storylines that have been slightly more complex and perhaps slightly more nuanced and slightly more detailed after this. But I don't think there have been many wrestling storylines before this where they legitimately wielded such a episodic story from one major show to the next. And so I think you're right. That this is the whole point of the show, is to get Savage to this point where they built him up for the next big match, and that will be against Hogan the following year, which Hogan will come out on top because he's still the top star, he's still the main guy, and they need him to be on the chase rather than defend him because there's just nobody left that's as dominant or as impressive as Andre is. Having said all that, I also think that's one of the reasons which makes it one of the worst WrestleManias ever, because it's not a show in and of itself. It's a show built to build another show.
Yeah.
And that's the same with WrestleMania 27, actually. It's a terrible show, and it's there solely to build towards WrestleMania 28. And
that's a really good parallel. Yeah.
And so that's why I think it's seen and is one of the worst WrestleManias ever, because it doesn't hold up as a show in itself. You wouldn't buy this show for what's on it in itself. It's funny, last episode I said that WrestleMania 3 was the first show where they'd given you a match, a main event, which was legitimately a WrestleMania main event because it was the first time in this particular instance that they'd faced each other, Hogan and Andre. It wasn't like they'd gone on the house show circuit for months before and then given you a cage match rematch, or it wasn't like they were looking to do that on the house show loads afterwards. It was legitimately, this is the big showpiece attraction match between Hogan and Andre. This reverts back to what WrestleMania 1 and WrestleMania 2 was, where they've not really given you anything of WrestleMania quality or worthiness to get your pay-per-view buy. But in this instance, it's because they want to build WrestleMania 5. And also, I wonder whether that's why they booked Trump Tower for both of them, believing it was kind of a sequel to WrestleMania 4, and that the denizens of the Trump Palace on this particular night would come back to see that sequel.
It's a really good point.
1 year later. Yeah. So all of that stuff for me is the whole point of the show. And I think, therefore, I really admire it, but I think it's just an awful show.
I get what you're saying with regards to the Hogan Savage thing. For me, it's just, it's an amazing story, and the plot holes along the way leading to WrestleMania, fantastic. But for me, they could have still told that story without Hogan celebrating at the end. For me personally, I think Hogan gets rid of Andre, goes himself, and then it's Savage's night. And it's not so much for me. It's Hogan completely politicking, because he's the one that runs out quickly to get the belt, he's the one that gives the belt to Savage, and then he's the one raising his hand, he's the one pointing him, and as well, he's bigger than Savage, so he's taller, he's bigger, he is the focus point in that ring, not Savage the champion. And that's what it should have been. It should have been Savage's night. He's the champion. That his celebration. I tell
you what, even if Hogan is politic, and I don't think he is, but even if he is at this stage, what you've just described is Savage's justification for hating Hogan.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So it works perfectly, because the whole point is what you've just said, is that's why Savage hates him, because he's stolen his spotlight.
If we were 10, I don't think we'd see that. If we were 15 upwards, we'd be like, why is Hogan in? Like, it's bollocks. And we might have all been, we'd have bought the pay-per-view either way, but we might have been, well, actually, Randy's right. And I think that there is an element of that as well. You know, as you said, Ben, the best heel reactions are when you believe you're right. And I think the Savage storyline, he believed he was right. And all the stuff, the hug of Elizabeth at SummerSlam, and you see Savage is fuming. He's like, okay, no, this is okay. Like, it's okay. And he simmers down. It's just, it is. And for Randy, this story really goes all the way through to WrestleMania 7 and a bit beyond. I know it all goes a bit bad after that, unfortunately, in his personal life. But this, the Savage storyline in WWF is just phenomenal in terms of that. The heel stuff, and he went babyface, and the mega powers, and the title run, and all that. So yeah, and Savage obviously is my MVP of the night, and this is my match of the night as well, without doubt.